Welcome once again to Sid Cordell Christian People's Alliance, and we're going to go through the Sunday newspapers. My goodness me, what a late thing. But I'll tell you what, the Sunday newspapers are a bit special in Britain, and they've got some very good opinion, op-ed articles. And I'm going to test Sid this morning and put him through the hoops. And there are 6 actually I want to cover, Sid. Which tells all about the political state of our country. I say all, there's so much going on at the moment. I don't know whether it should be all, but I'll start with the first one. And I'll read a headline on each case and then we'll chat about it. The first headline is Rishi that says, send a message to Starmer as he launches local election fight back. Now, that was in the Sun this weekend. So, yes, it's the elections, local elections coming up shortly. That has to be tackled as the first hurdle by Rishi. And he's challenging Starmer. And what's behind this, of course, is don't take your win, Sir Keir, as granted. There's a long way to go yet. As an example, Rishi has been really clobbering on around the lugholes about what is happening in local elections, what has happened on councils, county councils, local councils, and he drew up a list. He said, there you are, there's the Tory mayors. Look at how they've done brilliantly in local elections and in local matters. And there's a long list, a massive long list, of how Labour councils have truly messed up things because they're amateurs, he says. Well, you've only got to look at Birmingham, the biggest council in Europe, local council in Europe, to see what a mess they're in. And indeed, Nottinghamshire and many, many others throughout the land. He may have got a point of weakness here, Sid.
Well, yes, I think he's absolutely right. And of course, we could talk about Wales as well, which, the Labour Party don't want to talk about Wales. I mean, let's look about the state of the health service in Wales and this ridiculous thing that they brought in Wales of 20 miles an hour on basically all the 30-mile-an-hour roads are now 20 miles an hour. And the people in Wales are saying it's just ridiculous, and it's made their lives utterly miserable. But, every test of the services in Wales, the tax in Wales, and it's just like a disaster. And of course, you're right about Birmingham. But you see, what socialists tend to do is spend, and not worry about where the money's coming from until all the money's run out. And you see, the thing is, you can't carry on like that. And Keir Starmer might pretend, we're not like that. We're going to be fiscally responsible. And we've even had Rachel Reeves saying that, I'm going to be like Margaret Thatcher. I mean, but actually, she's not putting forward any policies that are remotely like Margaret Thatcher's policies, like controlling the money supply to reduce inflation. I mean, she couldn't even talk about inflation in her speech at the Labour Party conference. She hasn't, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think she's even mentioned bringing down inflation as one of her concerns ever. I mean, she may have mentioned, prices have gone up under the Conservatives. That's about it. I mean, she's never actually said this is the policy that we will put in place to bring down inflation. I mean, she's not said that once. I mean, and you see, the thing is, the Labour Party at the moment might be talking, a good government, but the reality of what they're actually proposing in their detailed policies is going to be disastrous. I mean, that's the reality of it. And that's besides all the woke stuff. I mean, they're totally committed to LGBT, transgenderism, abortion up to birth, all this stuff, which will be absolutely disastrous. I mean, people have got to wake up. They've absolutely got to wake up.
Indeed. Word on the block about the Sun newspaper is that actually Starmer has been cozying up to them in many ways, and they're on the point of supporting Labour in the next election. That's hot off the press. Let's see if it happens. Let's go on to the next paper, Sunday Express. And the headline is Pollster reveals the exact number of points Farage would boost Reform by coming back, either as the big white chief, which I think he would have to, or as the director of everything, whatever. He would at least boost the numbers that's saying by 2 points. That actually is on the way of putting the Tories in third place to Reform. And of course, the thing that has been said for month after month, if people vote for Reform, it's a disaster for the Tories. They will be out of office for 10, 20 years.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, the Conservatives are saying, oh, vote for Reform is a vote for Labour. And, you know, you're just letting Labour in if you vote for Reform. But if Reform are in second place and Conservatives are in third place, then it'll actually be a vote for the Conservatives as a vote for Labour. Because the Conservatives will, you know, by voting Conservative, you stop Reform getting in, and it's Reform that have got a better chance of beating Labour, possibly. But you see, I think Reform have still got some fundamental weaknesses. I mean, they've certainly got some weaknesses in their candidates, which has already been exposed in the place of some candidates. You know, there's one candidate which they had, which I knew from Speaker's Corner, and some of the things that he was saying were just outrageous. I mean, despite the fact that he was like an avowed atheist, and you know, he was obviously totally unsuitable to be a member of Parliament. Yet he was a Reform candidate, so they got some weaknesses there. They've certainly got weaknesses in their economic policies, because they say that they're going to increase the tax threshold to 20,000. They're going to greatly cut that, and they're going to cap tax, and so on and so forth. And they say, how are you going to pay for it? Well, the only answer we've got is cut 5% from every government department, which frankly would be disastrous. I mean, bringing in that sort of policy will be disastrous economically. So they need to change their policies. You see, the thing is, it's okay having this idea of, you know, we're pro-Brexit, we're anti-EU, and we want to control the borders and so on and so forth, which are very good policies. But the more they rise in the opinion polls, the more their detailed policies will come under scrutiny. And if their detailed policies can't stand scrutiny, then they might rise in the opinion polls, but then they'll fall again, because during a general election campaign, you can't get away with ridiculous policies that can't possibly be implemented and expect to get, you know, millions of votes. I mean, this is where the CPA comes in. But if only the Reform would actually adopt the CPA manifesto, then they would be in a fantastic position, frankly. I mean, because our policies, they all make wonderful economic sense.
Well, they've been costed, Sid. Good points you make there. I'm going to go on to the Mail on Sunday. Very influential rag is the Mail on Sunday. And the headline is how Cummings is orchestrating the destruction of the Tory party, with MPs claiming Sunak is on the brink. Well, yeah. Dominic has threatened to do everybody down in his lifetime, I think. He's very effective. I'm going to mention another name to you, Sid, Simon Clarke, ex-minister, Tory, and he's pushing for Rishi to go. We only need 2 more letters, according to him, to force the matter of a new leadership competition. So that's on the brink as well. And behind this lurks the Dominic. He wants the Tory party actually to be buried, ploughed in a field and covered with salt. That's the present Tory party, because it ain't a Tory party. It's a Liberal party gone woke. And there's only one way of dealing with it, is make sure they lose it completely, and then the Phoenix returns, the true Tories will come back. Interesting point, Sid.
Okay, well, it's interesting to know what the true Tories are. You see, I see this a little bit differently. You see, the way I see it is that under Margaret Thatcher, the Conservative Party was very much a moral party, supporting traditional family values and indeed fundamentally supporting Christian values. And it continued like that until Michael Howard took over in 2003. And when he took over, he shifted the whole focus of the party, and he basically said that people choose to lead their lives differently these days. We've got to adapt our policies accordingly. Out went Christian family values, in with liberal social values. They were looking for LGBT candidates, which they found. I mean, there's a number of Conservative MPs that are strongly pro-LGBT, and they're looking for Islamic candidates and so on and so forth. They wanted to change the whole Conservative Party. Now, it's interesting, you see, it started to shift back with the number of committed Christians that there are in the Conservative, among the Conservative MPs now. And they formed their own group within Parliament. And there's been a strong call to shift values back. Now, you see, it's quite interesting because, I mean, that group is probably represented by Liz Truss and Kemi Badenoch. But Liz Truss was disastrous economically, unfortunately. If she'd only had sensible economic policies, she would be the leader of the Conservative Party now, because she was elected leader of the Conservative Party. But she didn't. She had ridiculous economic policies. So Rishi Sunak got in. Rishi Sunak is unfortunately just like Keir Starmer in many ways. I mean, he's just utterly deceptive. I mean, he says one thing and does something different. I mean, he's obviously secretly pro-EU with the negotiation with that Windsor framework, which frankly was pretty awful. But what it did was basically tie the whole of the UK into EU laws in order to stop there being a hard border between Southern and Northern Ireland. That's basically what the Windsor framework did. But the fact that he negotiated that, and Ursula von der Leyen, of course, was all smiles, what a wonderful agreement we've now got, and so on and so forth. But you see, Rishi Sunak is not to be trusted at all. And I can understand why some Conservative MPs are literally like, we've got to get rid of him. Penny Mordaunt will be even worse than Rishi Sunak, because where he's deceptive, she's basically proved to have lied over where she stood on the LGBT issues. But we know where she stands. She's woke, but she lied about where she stands. So, you know, it's clearly she lied. So, I mean, yeah, you're going to have somebody like that coming in as the new leader. But the majority of Conservative MPs don't want her. So who do they want? Who are they going to bring in? I mean, Kemi Badenoch's not going to come in as leader now. I mean, she's probably positioning herself to be a challenger if the Conservatives lose the next general election, and I think she will be a strong challenger. If Rishi Sunak loses the election and resigns, you know, but she doesn't want to come in before the election, no way. I mean, you know, it would be disastrous for her to come in before the election.
Well,
so there's big.
Who wants to come in before the election? Nobody. So we're stuck with Rishi, aren't we?
Well, but Penny Mordaunt does. But she's saying, "Oh no, I'm just getting on with my job." But the things that she's doing, I mean, she clearly liked to be leader of the Conservative Party and liked to be leader of the Conservative Party now. But I think her idea is that she could become leader now and take the party into the next election, possibly do better than expected, and then remain leader afterwards, because she wouldn't be blamed because she's only been leader for such a short period of time. That's her idea. Where Rishi Sunak has been leader for long enough that he would now be blamed if the Conservatives lost it. But they're in a mess, but they'd be very foolish. The Conservative MPs would be very foolish to ditch Rishi Sunak now. They just want to let him go through, see what happens in the election, and then if he does badly, elect a new leader and hope they can come back. I mean, that's their best chance. I mean, frankly, I mean, ditching the leader now would just sink them even worse, because the ordinary man in the street would say, what, 4 leaders, you know, within the lifetime of a parliament, you know, and, you know, you can't make your mind up. The ordinary man in the street is not going to get behind Penny Mordaunt, I can tell you that now.
Right, let's go to the Sunday Express, and I shall tease you even further, because the Sunday Express headline, Johnson to be deployed, Boris, as part of radical Tory plan to stop Labour winning election. Now, what's behind this bit? is that there's 3 PMs going to be actually standing the next time. One is Rishi, of course. The second is Boris, who Rishi is on the point of persuading, allegedly, him to do the red wall bit, go back to the convincing the ordinary Joe that voted in the last election in Northern England. Boris is going to be put up there to try and do that bit. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we have our friend, Liberal. There's no more Liberal Tory available, never has been, I suppose, than Cameron. And he's going to be sent to the southwest of England, where you've got lots of Liberals, to try and get the Tory vote going down there. And then they hope to scrape back in. It's a plan. Is it going to work?
No. The reason the Red Wall people voted Conservative in the 2019 election was the very clever slogan of "Get Brexit Done," which came from Dominic Cummings, who we were talking about earlier. I mean, that's what Dominic Cummings achieved. I mean, I liked his slogan as well, by the way, of "Build Back Better," which Biden in America decided to make his slogan as well. But that came from Dominic Cummings. But, you know, these slogans that he's introduced have been very clever and worked. But if you put Boris Johnson there without the slogan, I mean, what's his slogan going to be? You know, keep Rishi. I mean, you know, people aren't going to vote in the Red Wall seats for keep Rishi, I'm afraid. No way. And as far as Cameron is concerned, Cameron has been a total disaster as Foreign Secretary from my perspective. I mean, the things that he's saying about Israel, I mean, you know, that punishing Israel for what they're doing in the West Bank, where, you know, the people, the Jewish people in the West Bank, you know, have the actual violence down there has actually gone down, and there've only ever been any violence recently when they've been attacked by Palestinians, and the Palestinian violence is 10 times recorded violence is 10 times from Palestinians from what it's been from the Jewish settlers. But he and Biden are attacking the Jewish settlers and making out that they're the problem. I mean, it's just utter nonsense. And as for, like, you know, if you attack Rafah, then we're going to stop all support to Israel and we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. I mean, the thing is, recognizing a Palestinian state basically means you've got to have a state with an army, because local government is obviously something we support. You know, the Palestinians controlling the health service, controlling the police force, all these sorts of things, which are under local government in this country. Supporting education, they can have their own education, they can have their own local government, which they should have, and they have got already under the Palestinian Authority. But what they can't have is an army in the West Bank and in Gaza. I mean, because once they have an army, that army is going to be a threat to Israel. I mean, there's no question about it. They've already proved to be a threat to Israel, as you know. So Israel cannot allow an army that's going to be on their borders in the West Bank and Gaza. No way. So the idea of a new Palestinian state is just simply off the table. But Cameron is saying, this is what I'm committed to. I mean, what the man is doing and saying is utter nonsense in as far as Israel is concerned. And it's a tragedy, because when we had Liz Truss as Foreign Secretary, she was actually taking the party back to very sensible policies as far as Israel was concerned, and as far as the world was concerned, frankly, and as far as the EU was concerned. You see, because Cameron's also trying to cozy up to the EU. I mean, he's a disaster as a Foreign Secretary. And you see, going off to the southwest and campaigning in the southwest and trying to get votes, you know, it's not gonna help, frankly, because there's too many people down there that are going to be very angry with him.
Right. Let's go to the Sunday Telegraph. Betrayed voters are finally exacting revenge on our arrogant elites. Now, a bit of philosophy here, political philosophy. Yes, to students of politics, this is blatantly obvious. There's been a real kickback among the famous average Joe. Revenge is being sought. Well, I'm going to point out some background information here. Let's look at Varadkar in Ireland. He's a woke elite, if anybody was, and he's had to resign. He wanted the constitution rewriting with no mention of men and women. They don't exist. The men and women, the real people in Southern Ireland, gave him 2 black eyes. There you go. You're not going to put those 2 acts of parliament through. The other was on abortion, by the way. So that's one thing about the elites. They've had a bloody nose and 2 black eyes. I'm going to mention Uxbridge and South Ruislip. No way should the average Conservative have won that seat, but they did because of more woke idiots. You, Les, friend Sadiq Khan, and the average Joe said, right, that's it, you're off. And they were. The ordinary person in the street thinks quite differently. He also thinks quite differently in local elections. He thinks differently in by-elections. The true Joe comes out perhaps only full-time at the proper elections, October, November this year. We think, putting that all in one pot, men and women are going to vote. And it's very interesting, something we found out, Sid. A lot for you to talk about on this one. 47% of males would vote Reform as we stand at this weekend. But only 20-odd% of ladies would vote for Reform. That's fascinating. Ladies more conservative, small c than men. Perhaps so. Perhaps we're more gung-ho as mere males and have had enough and want to get rid of the bad. There you go. Have a go at that lot.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Well, what I talk about is what you mentioned with ULEZ. You see, I think all these zones are nonsense, frankly. What it should be is a matter of the MOT. It's already, when cars go through the MOT, there's a test for how polluting they are. And if the cars are too polluting, then they fail the MOT. You can actually put catalytic converters on a car to reduce the emissions. Now, frankly, if a car is producing too many emissions, it should not be allowed on the road, full stop. If a car is not producing too many emissions, it's got the catalytic converter, it's a perfectly efficient car, then it can go on the road. The idea that it can go on the road in country lanes, but it can't go on the road in a city, I mean, it's just nonsense. All these zones are for is just to make money. I mean, they're just getting £12 or £15, off the poorest people, frankly, because it's only the poorest people that have got the older cars. But they're also obviously punishing people that have got diesel cars as well. So they're just pushing diesel cars off the road. But I think the whole thing that they're doing with these zones is perverse, frankly, and obviously people are absolutely right to vote against them, and it will affect these elections, no doubt. I mean, I think the Conservatives are in a very bad position nationwide, but it will affect the elections. I mean, we've already talked about Reform. I mean, it's interesting that they say that women are less favourable to Reform than men, but you see, I think one of the reasons that people are vote against Reform is the whole LGBT issue, which Reform are against. But it's not just LGBT; it's also the promotion of relationship and sex education in schools, which is being pushed. And I think there's a lot of people are saying, it's gone too far, and we've got to vote against it. And Reform are actually providing a platform where you can vote against it. And it's quite interesting, you see, these sort of Reform type parties are doing well all over the world. I mean, we've just recently had an election in Portugal where a Reform type party just ended up with over 50 seats, I believe, in the end, which was a massive increase. We've got a Reform type party actually elected in Italy. You've got a very good prime minister there, who's doing a good job. We've got Milei, who was elected in Argentina on that sort of platform. And they're actually concerned in the next EU elections that these sort of parties are going to actually end up with a majority in the EU Parliament, which would cause a massive problem for them. And people are fighting back. People are fighting back all over the place. But when they fight back, you see, you've got to be careful that what you're bringing in isn't worse than what you're getting rid of. You've got to actually do it, as I said earlier, with sensible, practical, pragmatic policies that work.
The elites have been sussed, and the fight back starts. But something that you've just hinted at, and I'm going to call the proverbial elephant in the room. And if you read 95% of the press, when they say what is top of the bill to be changed, why are people going to vote Tory? Why are people going to vote Labour? What are the key issues? They always put immigration fourth or fifth. That is rubbish. Anybody out of the leafy lanes of southeast England going up to the north of England, it's number 1 and 2, even above the economy in many, many places. Let's get real about this.
Okay, I mean, it's very interesting that obviously it's talked about quite a lot in the media, and in the last week we had a lot of people coming in boats across the channel, and that issue certainly needs to be dealt with. But I think we should say that the problem that we have in this country is nothing compared with the problem they've got in the United States. I mean, we're talking about 30,000 immigrants crossing the channel in a year. They're talking about 2.5 million coming in from Mexico in a year in America. And although obviously America is a bigger country, I mean, proportionately, you're still saying the figure is way higher. And the anger in America that Biden has pursued this open borders policy, which he's trying to deny it now. He's trying to say, oh, no, I've been doing my best to fix the border. It was broken before I came in, which is utter nonsense. Trump had put some very good policies in place, including building the wall, and had got, and a Remain in Mexico policy, and had basically got immigration down to a trickle. I mean, he really dealt with the issue. Biden came in and he made it very clear from the moment that he came in that nobody was going to be sent back. The governors of Texas and Florida have been very clever in actually busing immigrants into the sanctuary cities. The mayors in cities in places like Chicago and around New York that have said that we are a sanctuary city. We will welcome any immigrants into our city. Suddenly, they've got them being bussed in, and it's just like it doesn't quite seem so cheerful when they actually see them there. But we are seeing some increase in the UK, but we're not seeing the level of increase that they're seeing in America. And I don't think there is the level of anger. Frankly, it's there, but I don't think we've got the same level of anger that they've got in America.
Well, I hope you're right. Anger doesn't solve many problems. Sometimes it does. The righteous type of anger, maybe. And I think maybe because I'm a northern lad and I know the territory, there is real anger. They don't want any more people coming in because it's destroyed a community, many communities in the north, because there's been no assimilation. And the people with the power are still in the south and the southeast. And if they lived up north, my goodness me, perhaps they'd change their mind. Lastly, Sid, we're going to go to the last headline, and that's in the Mail on Sunday. Sunak may want to cling on, but he sits in number 10, not as PM, but as a squatter. That's Dan Hodges. Well, there you go. Information. And maybe he's right. Rishi is on the edge. He's hanging on. Why should he go? It can't get any worse. Well, let's watch. Last month it was highlighted, and this is what goes on behind the scenes. The large and the great went to Munich for a big European conference, and Sir Keir turned up for half a day, and he was practically mobbed because people wanted to talk to him. Didn't want to talk to Rishi. They wanted to talk for the future incumbent. And it's going on in the civil service back in dear old Blighty. The civil servants are twiddling their proverbial funds. Nothing's going to happen. They're taking the opportunity to go on a jolly abroad. What an excuse to try and prepare for literally the civil service has come to a zombie stop. Nobody's doing anything. What state we're in.
Yes, it's and I know what you're saying is correct from inside Parliament as well, because I've been speaking to MPs, and an MP actually said to me, "There's nothing going on in here. The Conservative Party have really completely run out of ideas, and everybody now is just waiting for the next election." So there's virtually no bills, there's virtually nothing going through, there's virtually nothing happening. So yeah, I think what you're saying is correct. Everyone's basically now waiting for the next election and preparing for the next election, whenever it will be. In my mind, it's by no means certain that the Labour Party are going to win. I mean, we talked earlier about some of the problems with the Labour parties in local government. And the fact that Keir Starmer keeps changing his mind, we can't rely on the policies he says, and some of the things that they come out with are basically outright lies. I mean, I was furious when Rachel Reeves was saying that the economy now is the worst since the last war. I mean, anybody that lived through the 1970s, knows full well that the economy now is way better than it was in the 1970s, when we were absolutely on our knees. We even went in 1976 to the International Monetary Fund to bail out the country because we couldn't afford to pay our bills, which is normally the International Monetary Fund, provides money to third world countries. And it's Western countries that are paying into it, where Britain was saying, well, we need to take money out of the International Monetary Fund. I mean, it was a complete joke, and we were absolutely on our knees. And when Margaret Thatcher came in 1979, she really was presented with a terrible, terrible mess. And over time, she turned it round. And I won't go into all the details of what she did to turn it round now, but she turned it round. But Rachel Reeves is trying to pretend we're in the same state now as we were in 1979, and the Labour Party's going to have to come in and sort out this terrible mess. I mean, it's a complete and utter lie. We're nowhere near as bad. I mean, just inflation is just one example. I mean, now 3.4%. When Margaret Thatcher came in 1979, it was over 20%. I mean, the state of the trade unions. I mean, in 1979, I mean, they were virtually running the country. I mean, we'd had this terrible winter of discontent when, the street rubbish was piled up on the streets, the snow wasn't cleared. I mean, you couldn't drive down the street because there was just walls of snow everywhere. I mean, it was just the whole economy was coming to a complete standstill, and the government was just subsidizing everything just to keep going, a little bit like we did in COVID, frankly. But I mean, they were doing it on a permanent basis, permanent subsidies here, there, and everywhere, just to try and keep things going. Margaret Thatcher stopped all those subsidies and instead put money into capital spending and put money into building new industry, which she did. In the short term, there were problems, there were major problems, but in the longer term, she built new industries, and Britain thrived, absolutely thrived. We're not in that place now, where everything is being subsidized, and they're going to have to stop the subsidies and build new industries. I mean, we could do with some capital investment, but the British economy is basically strong. And we're actually stronger now than Germany and France. And all this stuff about the disaster when we leave the EU hasn't happened at all. I mean, there's new trade agreements being made, all over the world. I mean, even just recently, we've made a new trade agreement with some American states, with Texas, for instance, and Texas is actually quite a big economy. EU hasn't got those trade agreements. EU's tried to make a trade agreement with Canada and completely failed because they couldn't get agreement. I mean, they're not making new trade agreements. They haven't even got there's no existing trade agreement between the EU and the United States. We're actually doing better now with trade agreements than the EU. And it's, we're actually the economy is actually now in quite a good place. I mean, The only thing is we're wasting billions and billions on quangos, which needs to be stopped. And we're also wasting money on the government contracts with all these social requirements, which we need to get rid of. We could save billions that way. And, you know, we need to reduce revenue spending that way, and we need to use that money for capital spending. We need to make some changes. But the idea that we're in a total mess is frankly false, totally false. And, you know, if people are going to vote for, you know, the concept that Britain now is in a total mess, we're in the worst state since the Second World War, then they're going to be voting for a lie. That's the truth.
Right. We've done the newspapers. Let's do Batley, because there's been a report this last week saying that certain things have got to change. No-go areas. We've got another no. Not only is this outside abortion clinics, they want them now for outside schools, 150 meters. That school in Batley was harangued by the local Muslim community. Lots going on here, Sid. I, for one, am not a great fan of no-go zones. This is not democracy. It's China. But having said that, are we really that far down the road?
You see, schools are supposed to educate on behalf of parents. If a school has got to a place where the parents are massing outside the school, up in arms about what's going on inside, then that's a fundamental failure of the school, frankly, not to work effectively with their parents. And what the teacher did in Batley in showing cartoons of Muhammad was absolutely wrong. If they had been showing in a school cartoons of Jesus or showing the film The Life of Brian, which was an utterly blasphemous film, frankly. I mean, you know, if people want to go and watch that in the cinema, you know, they've got the right to go and watch it. When it comes to education and showing things in schools, then showing something like that in a school is wrong, utterly wrong.
Well, it may be wrong, Sid, but I can't see the English Joe going up there and causing havoc like the Muslim Joe.
Well, you know, maybe an Englishman would probably do it in different ways. They wouldn't mass outside the schools, but they would be probably writing to the head teacher and writing to the MP and protesting in a more in a quieter way. But
well, I'm sure you're right, Sid. But as we've been saying for weeks on several programs, the C word, culture, has got to come in here. If people will not accept the British culture, there are problems, and this has been highlighted.
Yeah, but you see, if what they were protesting about was something that was totally unreasonable, then I would say, I'm sorry, but they shouldn't be protesting. But what they were protesting about in that case was something totally reasonable. I'm sorry, but they should not be showing cartoons of Muhammad in a school, because you don't make fun of somebody else's religion. You see, if what they were doing was actually saying, right, we're going to do a class on the history of Islam, and they were showing the film, for instance, like Tom Holland's film. Tom Holland's book was In the Shadow of the Form. His film was Islam: The Untold Story, and that is historically factual film. Now, that would be very unpleasant for Muslims, for a school to be showing an historically accurate film like that. By the way, they wouldn't be showing it to young children. They'd be showing it to a senior school. But if they were showing that film and saying, right, we need to discuss and debate the history of Islam, what is true, what is untrue, let's talk about it, let's discuss it. Now, if the Muslims were up in arms and saying, how dare you show that film about the history of Islam, because that doesn't accord with our narrative, then I'd be saying, well, I'm sorry, but they're wrong. A school has got a right to have a look at the history of Islam and have a look at what is truth and seek to get to grips with what is the truth. But simply mocking a religion and mocking Muhammad is not acceptable, and that is different. Hopefully people understand what I'm saying.
Well, I'm sure they do, but the other thing is, allegedly again, the guy was using this as an illustration. He wasn't saying, oh, well, that's your Muhammad, that's your God. He was saying as a matter of illustration. Maybe something similar to what happened in Paris.
Okay, well, it's insensitive because, as I say, if a teacher was using some film mocking Jesus as some illustration, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to me as a Christian, and I don't care, about how many people protest. I mean, maybe the figures aren't what we want, but I mean, we did have about 3,000 outside Parliament when they wanted to introduce that incitement of religious hatred, which would make it criminal to criticise other religions. I mean, we managed to have a decent protest over that. We have had some fairly decent protests, but obviously Christians don't tend to protest as much as Muslims protest. But nevertheless, I mean, if they introduce something that is basically blasphemous against Jesus in a school, then we would absolutely be up in arms. And that is not acceptable. And that is different. I don't care whether it's an illustration. It's a different from just simply having a factually addressing issues. I mean, if they were factually addressing issues, for instance, over the manuscripts of the New Testament and what is available, isn't available, can we rely on the New Testament historically? Can we rely on the Old Testament historically? What is the historical background to it? What is the historical evidence to back it up? If those were the questions being asked, I'd say they're absolutely legitimate questions. And there's nothing wrong with asking those questions in schools.
Let me ask you another legitimate question. The quality of the incoming government, which is 95% sure to be Labour, is being questioned. My goodness me. Let me tell you one thing that's being said. When you take your seat in Parliament, you're sworn in. Let's give you some figures. 6% of the Tories, but only 6% chose not to pick up the Bible and swear. 41% of Labour chose not to swear on the Bible. Now, that may be because the roots of socialism, perhaps, for those people were in Marxism. Think about that. Think about the effect of a big majority of socialism in the next Parliament. Where are they going to come from? We've mentioned it on a number of occasions, Sid. You can clearly see the quality between the average Labour MP and the average Tory MP. It's there to behold. But when you're going to fill the gap from socialist straight out of university coming and being MPs, yes, they're young, nothing necessarily wrong with that, but they've got no mileage. They've not got any mileage in business. They're coming straight out of a uni. 90% of the unis are very, very left-wing, and they're going to be our next leaders. Worth thinking about, Sid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of swearing, it depends really why people aren't swearing on the Bible. I mean, when I've been in court and I've been asked to swear on the Bible, and I've taken the option of not swearing on the Bible, of affirming, simply because the Bible itself says do not swear. I mean, it's very clear in Matthew chapter 5, do not swear, either by heaven or with God's throne or by earth, which footstool, let what you say be simply yes or no. So that's what it says. So the idea that we should swear as a Christian was actually contrary to what the Bible says. But I mean, if someone chooses to swear on the Bible, I mean, I wouldn't say, oh, that's evil, that's wrong. But I would choose not to. But if a Labour MP is refusing to swear on the Bible because he rejects all the Bible's teaching, then that's a different matter altogether. And if they choose instead to swear on the Quran because they say, well, the Quran is the correct teaching, the Bible is false teaching. Well, the Quran, for instance, says that Jesus didn't die on the cross. And if you say he's the Son of God, you'll go to hell. Besides other things which we might find unacceptable in the Quran. So the Quran is totally anti-Christian. So if Labour MPs are choosing that option, I would say that's very concerning. And if they choose to refuse to show on the Bible because they reject the Bible's teaching, that's also concerning. So the question is, why are they doing that? The 6% Conservatives, I mean, I don't know. They may just be like me, saying, well, the Bible says don't swear, so I choose not to swear on that basis. But I don't know why. I mean, but the fact that 94% are swearing on the Bible means presumably that 94% at least respect the Bibles and respect it as an institution, I guess. But anyway, that's as it. I mean, if I was told, I'm sorry, you've got no choice, you've got to swear on the Bible, then I don't think it's a sin to do so. But if you've got a choice, I'd choose not to. But it is concerning, the sort of Labour MPs we're going to get if we do get a flood of Labour MPs. I mean, if we get Labour MPs after the next election, similar to the Conservatives after 2019, then we'll have 350 Labour MPs, which will be a matter of probably 120, 130 new Labour MPs coming into Parliament. And you would expect that very large number of those MPs will be totally supporting LGBT, if not all of them. You would expect the vast majority to. I mean, at the moment, you've just got one or two Labour MPs that basically say we reject transgenderism, normally on a platform of feminism, and they've had a terrible time within the Labour Party, simply for saying that they disagree with transgenderism, let alone anything else. The Labour Party now is very hostile to Christianity. I mean, I do know, for instance, of some Conservative councillors, some Labour councillors that were elected to a council, and it just turned out that 8 of them were actually black Christians elected on to a council as Labour councillors. And when they came to their first meeting, one of them actually said, well, I want to make it clear that I'm anti-abortion and that I believe in marriage and the family. And from that moment that he said that at the first meeting, he was treated as an outcast and enemy, even though he was a Labour councillor, and excluded from any position, any authority within the group, and so on and so forth. But there were 8 of them, but the whole group of 8 was basically considered as even though they were elected as Labour councillors, were considered absolutely outcasts by the group on that council. So there's no tolerance within the Labour Party for Christians, not today.
How sad that is, but there you go. As usual, we say the apposite item to the last, and sure enough, today it's reared its ugly head. And I felt sorry for you, actually, personally, in all this. I mean, what you're going to buy the kids if you can't buy them an England shirt? Your views on that, Sid?
Oh, I think it's terrible. But you see, what it actually is a rejection of the Christian symbol, which is St. George's cross, and replacing it by a transgender symbol by using the transgender colours, and thinking that is now the modern equivalent. Sorry, it's terrible. It is absolutely terrible, and it's an abuse of sport, frankly. And I hope that the England fans will absolutely boycott that shirt and refuse to buy it. And Nike will, I believe Nike themselves are woke, but I hope that Nike themselves will lose so much business from it that they'll never do it again.
Well, there you go. As we keep saying, perhaps it's just me that keeps saying they'll never win anything with woke Gareth. From rainbow bootlaces to bending the knee, he was the last one to even get rid of that. Perhaps that was illustrated on the so-called friendly against Brazil. I thought it was pathetic. Oh, it's Harry Kane, wasn't there? No, it goes much deeper than that. You can't win anything with a woke manager. I hope I'm proved wrong, because I support England, but I'm afraid I don't think we'll do it again. You've got to have somebody with resilience, with leadership, and not wokeship.
Well, there have been in the past, I don't know really currently, but a lot of very devout, committed Christians in the Brazilian team. I mean, Kaká was an example, brilliant player. and a lot of them were honouring God and praying before matches and after matches. And funnily enough, you tend to get it in a number of South American football teams, and you certainly get it in some Pacific teams like Fiji, who are openly all praying together before a football match.
Does this apply to Argentina, that they pray before they stick the boot into you?
I honestly don't know. I haven't seen anyone from Argentina praying specifically, but I know that there's a number of players that will absolutely honour God before a match and maybe after a match as well. And frankly, a team that is honouring God will have my support in front of the England team, the way they're behaving at the moment.
Yes, there you go. Interesting. Thank you, Sid. We'll let you go for a lie down now, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.